Hi, this is Noah with Renters Together MHK. Today we're going to look at safe housing in Manhattan, Kansas.
So, what is safe housing? What does it look like? Is safe housing a problem in Manhattan? Well, today we're going to take a closer look at our housing situation here in Manhattan, Kansas, with regards to safety.
Well, safe housing is what houses are built to do, which is protect you from the environment, keep you safe from animals and insects, and overall create an environment that is safe and comfortable for people.
Well, what makes housing unsafe? Well, structural failures, flooding, lack of fire escapes, mold, lack of air filtration, and animal or insect infestations are just a few examples of unsafe housing conditions. Even a building's inability to bring in fresh air, either through ventilation or infiltration, can have an impact on your health.
Infiltration is how much fresh outside air is allowed to come into the building through cracks or tiny little spaces between doors or windows.
Some houses, especially older ones, have built in infiltration to allow more fresh air into the building. However, too much infiltration allows too much hot or cold air into the building, which can be a huge strain on your heater or AC. This can be very expensive, especially if you're the one who's paying the utility bills. It's important to note that the bigger the cracks in the building or the spaces around the doors and windows, the greater the chance of getting an infestation of insects like ants or animals like bats.
But is there really any unsafe housing here in Manhattan? Is this any of this relevant? Well, yes. Yes, it definitely is. This happens all too often here. And a lot of these stories just get swept under the rug and you don't really hear about them.
A recent and very public example is the case of K-State veterinarian student Audrey. Frontier Property Management knowingly rented out a bat-infested home to Audrey. Unfortunately, once you've signed the lease, you're stuck. Audrey moved out of the house, but she still had to pay rent for that house until the lease was up. She ended up paying for two homes and only got $90 back for her security deposit out of the $500 she paid before she moved in. In the end, Audrey ended up working multiple jobs to pay for two homes while studying to become a veterinarian and only got back less than a quarter of her security deposit so Frontier could clean up their mess with her money. There were no consequences due to their actions.
Personally, I have had some issues with mold and ant infestations. It's not fun. It's really hard to do school and work and then come home to a house that isn't very comfortable, with ants roaming around. And it's probably not safe with mold under the bathroom sink. I've had numerous friends have stories that are just awful, related to flooding and infestations. And being a part of Renters Together, you hear of these awful stories quite often. Many people reach out to us about their just horrendous housing conditions.
As you can see in the City of Manhattan website, in Renting in Manhattan, there are two surveys. There's one done by a K-State student for renters, and there's one done by the City of Manhattan for landlords. So it looks like this study was conducted by Justin Watkins, a sophomore studying political science at K-State. And this isn't the best survey ever, simply because there's some title issues, and there is no date, so we're not really sure when this survey was taken. But unfortunately, this is just the best we've got. So as you can see, there is a significant amount of renters who believe their homes do not meet code requirements. 14% may not sound like much, but when it comes to the safety and well-being of Manhattan renters, this number is way too high.
How or why is this even a problem here in Manhattan? Well, there are a few possibilities. So one possibility is landlords are not getting their houses inspected, and instead of using that money that you pay for rent, which is supposed to go to housing maintenance, they're pocketing or investing it into their business. Second possibility is they are getting their houses inspected and then they know of these problems. They are just not doing anything about it. A third option is, regardless if these landlords are getting their properties inspected or not, they just don't have the money to make repairs. But don't we have any regulations here in Manhattan? Is there anything preventing this? There isn't really any regulation on this. The city of Manhattan has a rental registration program, so all rental dwelling units must be registered with the city before people occupy that. And that really doesn't stop anything. You could just register a property and say, hey, this is my property, this is what it is, and that's that. There's no inspections. Inspections are just optional. But how many people actually even know about the inspection program? So on that survey that the city has on their website, this was pretty interesting. The question asks, are you aware that the city of Manhattan has a rental inspection service that allows you to call the code office and request a free inspection of your rental unit? And it looks like most people, 76% of people, have no idea that this exists. What can we do? Like, how do we ensure that housing is safe here in Manhattan? So the first thing is, what we've kind of been doing already, is crossing our fingers and just hoping that either landlords will repair their houses and we'll have 0 houses that are unsafe and perfectly fine for renters, or that renters will have the same professional expertise as a building inspector and be able to distinguish housing that is unsafe or housing that is safe and avoid the housing that's unsafe. The second is, the city could provide some sort of incentives or rewards for landlords that are getting their properties inspected and can actually pass an inspection. The third option is, the city of Manhattan can require landlords to have a rental housing license. So if I was a landlord, before I could rent it out to anybody, I would need to get my house inspected by a professional building inspector through the city of Manhattan. And if I get that passed, if my house is perfectly safe for people to live in, I can rent it out to people. If it's not, well, I can't rent it out to people until I get those repairs made. The last option also provides landlords or property owners with valuable information about their property. A building inspector can notice certain things like a little crack in the foundation, a little bit of moisture damage, and share it to the landlord. And instead of the landlord being oblivious about this, they can spend $1,000 to repair that little small issue now, rather than letting that issue grow and fester and get worse and have to pay $10,000 later. But is this really the best option? Well, Monica McFarland thinks so. Monica is currently running for city commissioner for the city of Manhattan, Kansas. She's mainly running on safe and affordable housing for Manhattan renters using rental housing licenses as a way of achieving safe housing.
What would happen, property would be licensed. When the property becomes licensed, then the landlord would get a notice from the city saying that they are due for inspection. That's when it initially is licensed. After that, then it would be on a rotating schedule, and it would probably be about every 3 years. Once the landlord got the notice that, hey, the inspection is coming up, it would probably be somewhere between 30 to 45 days, saying, please, within this time, get in touch with your tenant and contact us with a time that we can go in to do the inspection. Part of that would be to obtain the tenant's signature, their consent to actually do the inspection. Okay. Now, understand, a landlord has no legal obligation to get that tenant to sign for the city. Once the tenant has given the permission, then they would coordinate an inspection date and time with the city, and then the city would come out and conduct that inspection. The inspection program is looking really at items of vital importance to health and safety of tenants. It's not looking at, the nitty gritty of, hey, you've got, a house that was built in 1920 and we're trying to get you to update the walls so that you have a light socket every 10 feet or whatever. It's actually, hey, do you have exposed wiring? Do you have cracks in your foundation? Do you have problems with water? Do you have proper heat and cooling in the home? Do you have certain setups in the kitchen, so that you actually have safe preparation of food, these type of things. And so they would be inspected on those items, and then they would have a opportunity, landlords would, if they pass the inspection, to not be inspected again. In 3 years, they would get a grace period. So it wouldn't be for 6, unless the tenant, of the property says, hey, I've got an issue, and call up to the city, and then the city goes, okay, well, yeah, I need to come back in and take a look. Failure to either complete an inspection, whether that's not on the tenant's end, because we'd have to get the search warrant, but if a landlord failed to comply, because what we would try to do is actually go and inspect those properties that aren't resided in right away, try and make sure that they're taken care of before you get a tenant in there. I know it's a great concept, right? Get them inspected and make sure that they're safe before you put a tenant in. But failure to complete an inspection or correct the violations would then cause the rental license to be either put on probation or revoked. So it's much like a business. You have a service that you are providing to the public that can affect their health and welfare. Therefore, you need to be licensed.
If housing inspection programs actually worked, wouldn't we already have a housing inspection program? Do any other cities have housing inspection programs? If we were to take a look at our neighbors over in Lawrence, Kansas, we'd see that they already have a rental licensing program set up. Just looking at their website, you could see they consider safe housing to be a right for all people. There's a lot of information on here, an interactive map, and they also are fully transparent on what these inspections find and the violations that they find. The cost to inspect these units is actually incredibly cheap. It's about less than $2 a month. The landlords in Lawrence pay about $17 a unit or less annually, so it's incredibly affordable to prevent unsafe housing conditions. I'm not going to go through all of this because there's a lot of information and it's probably not worth your time, but if it is, I'll put a link in the description below. Who better to tell if a home is safe than a housing inspector? Just like any other business, there are regulations to make sure whatever you get into, your safety and well-being are not put at risk. When you go to a restaurant, you don't think twice whether the food is safe to eat or not, thanks to mandatory health inspectors. You don't think twice whether a bridge you drive over is going to collapse, thanks to mandatory inspections. So why, when it comes to housing, why would renters have to worry whether their next home could put them or their possessions in harm's way? If with all other aspects of life we have that peace of mind, why not with the homes we live in? Just so all of you know, this video isn't an endorsement of Monica McFarland. I just thought it would be incredibly helpful to include her since she's the only city commissioner here in Manhattan who's advocating for safe housing. And there really isn't a lot of politicians here, city commissioners or county commissioners, that do what's necessary for housing. What do you think about the housing conditions here in Manhattan? Are they adequate? Are they safe enough? Do you think housing should be safe before landlords move in? How would you judge the housing quality here in Manhattan? If this video was helpful to you in any way, please leave a like, comment. If there's something you didn't like about this video, leave a dislike and a comment. Your perspective and your criticism can only help us. The qualities of these videos will only get better. This was just a very brief overview of safe housing here in Manhattan. There's a lot more I could have covered, but I will save that for future videos. What are you curious to know more about? there's a lot about housing that YouTubers aren't covering. I could do videos on more safe housing, affordable housing, Section 8 housing vouchers. The list really just goes on and on. You can learn more about Renters Together and everything we do at our website. We have a huge survey coming up. We're going to be surveying as many renters as we can in Manhattan to really get a sense of how people are doing at this stage of the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, no one else is doing any kind of surveys, which is kind of preposterous, simply because, people have been struggling this entire year, and sure, they've gotten, some crumbs of a stimulus check, but with the eviction moratorium ending, at the end of July, I don't know. Nobody knows really how renters are doing, and stuff I've been hearing on the news, and personally, it just doesn't sound good. People already are being evicted during the eviction moratorium, so eviction moratorium is not even working. But thank you guys so much. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Of course, every YouTube channel tells you to do that.